There we go. We are live. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Happy April. It's hard to believe spring is officially here. Yay! We are so lucky to be kicking off April with a good friend, a recent friend, but a very good friend, becoming closer, Clarence Singleton. And lots of conversation tonight is going to be around some military service and some response work at Ground Zero shortly after the September 11th attacks in 2001. So I just want to throw that caution out to anybody watching. Please view at your leisure. It's going to be a great conversation, but I certainly want everybody to feel comfortable in the spots that they're in for this conversation. So I will turn it over to you guys. I'm looking forward to it.
Good evening, everybody. Clarence, thanks for joining us, buddy. Glad to have you here, and I think you and I are going to have an interesting conversation, to say the least.
Thank you, Doc. Thanks for the invite.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So let's go back to the beginning. Well, sort of the beginning. You grew up in Sumter, South Carolina.
Yes.
You were at the class of '67 in high school, I gather.
Yes.
And from there, you went to the United States Marine Corps. Tell us how you got from Sumter, South Carolina in high school to the Marine Corps.
Yeah, Doc, there was a friend of mine. He graduated from my house school the year before I did and went into the Marine Corps, and he came back to school one day in his uniform, and he was a football player, and this guy was stocky and it really looked good. It impressed me. So that was that planted the seed in my mind. So several months later, a Marine Corps recruiter came to the school, and he caught me. They impressed me, and I volunteered, signed the papers, and when I graduated, I was off to the Marine Corps. But some years later, I discovered that I grew up in a very poor family, really dirt poor, and I was called a lot of names, and I grew up really in a real tough, emotional kind of state. And so I found out later that guys like myself, sometimes we go into things like Marine Corps to prove to people that we are somebody, as opposed to how we were treated when we were growing up. And I don't have that problem anymore. I know I'm somebody.
I hear that. And the interesting thing about the military that we talked about a little while ago is that once you are there, you're all the same color.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Your Marines, your shipmates, if it's in the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
it's everybody's the same.
Oh yeah.
Everybody puts their pants on the same way and their boots on the same way every day.
Mm-hmm.
And off you go.
Mm-hmm.
So you joined the Marine Corps, and from Paris Island, it looks like you almost went direct to Vietnam.
Yes.
Without passing go.
I went to, after boot camp from Paris Island, by the way, I was the outstanding member of my platoon. I graduated from Paris Island.
You're the honor graduate, right? Yeah.
Today's term, that would be the valedictorian.
Yep.
Hoorah! And so I won the Marine Corps dress blue uniform. I was meritoriously promoted, and I got won a year subscription to the Marine Corps Leatherneck magazine. And after boot camp, I went to ITR advanced training at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And then
Another garden spot.
Yeah. 20 days, and then off to Vietnam with a stop in California for a little while. But then I was off to Vietnam, first Okinawa for staging.
Yep.
And then wait for your flight to go to Vietnam.
And in Vietnam, you took a round and.
Yeah. I was with, as a matter of fact, Doc, my unit, I was with the 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines. For the most part, we came back to the States. We were either wounded or in a coffin. Of the 2 dog tags that are issued, it was mandatory that we wore one around our necks and one laced in our boots.
Right.
I think you know why, the reason
Yep.
for that. Mm-hmm. And
For those that don't understand that, Clarence, let's explain it to them.
okay, that's in case you're injured and you get, they find you in different sections, you know, I'm trying to clean it up a little bit. But I was hit 5 times on December 23rd, 1968. And the guys who picked me up and rushed me to the hospital, they weren't of my color. So you mentioned earlier about the camaraderie. And these guys, they put me on a mule. Mule is just like a little golf cart.
Yep.
There's 4 wheels and a steering wheel, open air.
Yep.
But man, these guys were driving, boy. They were getting me over the 3rd med in a hurry. Mm-hmm.
And from there, you were evacuated to Japan.
Yes, I went from Vietnam. I think I was on a Repos hospital ship. It was 2 hospital ships. One was located up north and one down south. And I'm pretty sure it was the Repos that I was on. And it brought me down to Da Nang. And then from Da Nang, they flew me over to Yokosuka, Japan after several days, of course. And while in Japan, they couldn't perform surgery on me right away because I have a rarest of the rarest blood, AB negative.
Mm-hmm.
It's a special helicopter out to find my blood to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, doctors used to come down to the ward to look at me and say, "Where's the weird guy?" And they told me that I was the only one that passed through with that type blood in 6 months. And you know how many guys were being wounded?
A lot. Yeah.
An awful lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, Doc, I still wonder sometimes I lost a lot of friends on the day I was wounded. And I do have one regret. There was a guy, Jim, he was with us and he got a job driving one of the offices. And we were like, yeah, go, man, get out of the bushes with us. We were happy for him. And 2 weeks later, he came back and we were, what are you doing out here with us? And he said it didn't work out. And he was one of the guys that was made a supreme sacrifice the day I was wounded. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and I was supposed to, because he was in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was at a Navy hospital in Charleston. I was supposed to go by his, the corpsman asked me to go by his house to talk to his relatives. And myself and some Marines, we went over one night and I walked over to the door and I raised my hand to knock and it just wouldn't happen. I walked away, but I kind of regret that. Maybe the family wanted to see me back. I just couldn't do it, you know.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I get it.
Yeah.
So 1968, you got discharged from the Marine Corps in what year?
1969, I think it was September of 1969.
Okay.
And this was after a long hospital stay in Charleston, South Carolina. And I went back to Sumter, South Carolina, but I felt too grown to stay home with Mama after serving in Marine Corps in Vietnam. So I told her, I said, Ma, I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm going to New York to visit my sister. I haven't made it back yet. But I'm getting closer. I'm in Virginia now, so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you went to New York to visit your sister. Mm-hmm. How did you get from there to the fire department of the city of New York?
Yes, well, I was 29 years old. I was getting older and I wanted a job that was really beneficial, a job with benefits. And also it appealed to me because I knew that it was tough work being a firefighter. And one day I saw this fire truck that were by the Navy Yard at a bank, and man, the truck looked good and the guys looked good in their uniforms. And so that kind of planted the seed. And then one day I was passing a firehouse in Brooklyn and there was 2 guys outside of the firehouse, 2 firefighters, and they kind of recruited me and said, oh, man, come on, it's a great job. And so I took the application and as a matter of fact, I think the application was $25 to file and I didn't have the $25. I borrowed it and I filed the application and called me for the fire department called me for the what was it, that would be the written tests, and then physical, and then investigation. You know, I was thinking earlier today, sometimes when we want something, we really have to go at it. During the physical portion of the entrance exam, we had snow in New York. I think it was about 24 inches of snow, a little over 2 feet. And I was running in the car.
Yeah, I know what year you're talking about. As a matter of fact, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I was going to take my physical for the fire department. So I kept running in the snow, and people would laugh at me. I said, "You laugh now, but I'll show you." And I got the job. You know, Doc, while I'm here, there's one thing I want to say also. The morning of the written exam, I went to school in Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn. I think it was Brooklyn Tech. I'm not quite sure. And I saw this whole throng of guys and just a few young ladies mixed in. And I started walking away. I said, I don't stand a chance. And this is just one site. There was a site in every borough. There's 5 boroughs in New York: Manhattan, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens, and whatever the other one is. And my inner voice, I call my godly voice, said, Clarence, stay here and take the exam. So I reluctantly went in, sat down, took the exam, and I was in the second class to be promoted, and I was walking away from that. But the experience I learned from that is, don't count yourself out. You know, go through the process. Let them tell you no. Don't tell yourself no before you've tried. So that was a good experience for me throughout the remainder of my career in the fire department and elsewhere.
Cool. So your next stop after that was Staten Island at the academy, and and then where were you in the city as part of the department? What borough?
I started out in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, Engine 55 in what would that be? Chinatown, Little Italy, Chinatown.
Yeah.
And it was a pilot program that the fire department had instituted. They were going to keep us new guys, we call them probies, into engines for engine companies for 1 year. Engine company, these are the guys with the hose.
Yep.
And then they would transfer them into trucks. There's a ladder guys with the ladder to building, etc. And that's what happened to me. So I was transferred from engine 55 to ladder 12 in Manhattan. And I stayed at ladder 12 for about, I think it was 16 years until I was promoted to lieutenant. I studied really hard and diligently, and I became a fire lieutenant because I felt as if I could lead the guys. And I'd like to say I was a great lieutenant. So.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I think what's unique about your transition from the Marine Corps to FDNY is that it's all the same. We're all brothers. And that I think is one of the benefits of the fire service is no matter what department you're with, everybody's a brother.
Yep, exactly.
You know, I was a firefighter north of the city. I'd go down and work with the guys in the Bronx.
Yep.
They didn't care where I came from or what I did. As long as I could haul a hose and make the water go in the right direction, they were pretty happy.
Well, I've never met a better group of people. I mean, they're really nice, the guys I work with.
Very loyal.
Some of them
very loyal people they work with.
Yeah.
So you went to the year 2000 and retired.
Yes.
From FDNY.
Yes.
And then all hell broke loose on 9/11/2001. And you, like a lot of retired guys, because I bumped into a bunch of them at Ground Zero, ended up back at Ground Zero lending a hand. You were unique, though, in that you got there pretty early. Where were you living at the time that you got into the city that fast?
I was living in Brooklyn.
Okay.
At the time.
So you just came across the bridge then?
Yeah, exactly.
Headed south. Yeah.
Right. And actually what I did was I drove as close to the bridge as I could get. And then I jumped on the subway because I worked in Manhattan and I knew traffic was going to be horrendous.
Sure.
So I jumped on the subway and went over to the site.
Yeah. And where were you helping out at the time when the North Tower collapsed?
I was, Doc, after getting off of the train, I was walking in to the site and I met the police commissioner, fire commissioner, and their entourage. They were leaving the scene covered with dust, but nothing told me that, Clarence, the building had collapsed, one of the towers. And when I got to the scene, I was on Church and Day Street, DEY Street, and there was there's an engine coming. It looked like a ghost town.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see anyone around other than the engine company chauffeur. But as I passed his engine 211, I was walking over to the tower. I was going to check in with the chief and tell him to use me in any way you can. I didn't realize that they were all had made this supreme sacrifice. I saw this big jagged piece of metal, which was the frame of the South Tower that had fallen. But in my mind said, that's probably some artwork. My brain just wasn't grasping anything. And sometimes the tower, they lined up. One was perfectly behind the other. So I assumed the South Tower was behind the North. So I was on Day, and it was Broadway, I think it is. Yeah, Broad Street, probably Broad Street in that area. And I started working with firefighters. As a matter of fact, I have pictures here where we're extinguishing a fire in a bus. Sorry, that's fire department jargon for ambulance bus.
Yeah.
And, we were extinguishing our fires in an ambulance, and all of the vehicles around the perimeter when we heard the loud bang, like something let go. And we didn't look up. We stared at each other. We heard it again, and instinct told us that the tower was coming down. So we bolted. And I ran, I don't know, I'm assuming about 30 feet. And I was skidding along on the ground, and I was trying to get up as I was skidding along, but it wasn't going to happen because I had a right shoulder dislocation.
Yeah.
I only had one arm at that point. So
yeah, it's pretty stunning. I think you and I, having both been there are some rather permanent images burned into our brains, I believe. One of the things that I think shocked me, one of the first things that shocked me was when I got down to the southwest corner of Ground Zero, where the Marriott Hotel was, and there was only about, maybe 3.5 stories of it left. And I thought, holy crap, this is real.
Yeah.
And the one place I never took a photograph, and I should have, there was a yard. I got involved with some other people at Ground Zero doing some security stuff around the perimeter, as well as doing the medical stuff I was doing. And there was a section set aside for recovered fire equipment down at the south end of Ground Zero. I should have taken a photograph of that collection of equipment, because for every single piece of equipment there, a number of firefighters died.
Yes. Yes.
Pure and simple.
Yeah.
And very sad. So you've written a book called The Heart of a Hero, which is Barnes and Noble and other places where you can get it.
Yes.
What have you and I experienced that you want to share that is part of that book, or part of the motivation of that book?
Well, Doc, is I wanted to, it was difficult in the beginning, or even thinking about writing a book, because now I have to let people know how I'm feeling. And I wanted to discuss my post-traumatic stress and depression, but I didn't want to talk about it because people are thinking I'm weak, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was very difficult. And I came to the conclusion, I said, if I put something in this book, if I write something in a book that people don't agree with, or they're going to judge me about it, who have the problem? They do, not I. So I spilled my heart in the book, And this is something, you mentioned cameras, taking pictures. After I got up off of the ground with my dislocated shoulder, I came to a wall which was too tall for me to scale.
Yep.
I moved to my left. It was a shorter wall. I managed to scale it, and I looked down some steps, and I saw the fire marshal I was working with earlier. He was standing in a doorway and a lot of bright light shining through. This is the doors with the panic bars. And he looked at me, and he didn't have a speck of dust on him, which is impossible. Dust was going around the corners.
Yeah.
So he looked at me, he said, "I see you made it." So I said, "Yeah, you too." And I asked him for my camera because we had been taking pictures earlier. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I dropped it. I was running for my life." And the next scene, I'm outside, 3 or 4 EMS workers walking my way. They said, "No one here needs help." And I said, "Yeah, guys, I'm injured." But just before I saw the EMS guys, I remembered I was wearing my glasses. I pulled them down on my nose. Make a long story short, I was telling a story about what I just told you in a World Trade Center survivors group. A lot of therapists, high-powered therapists. And one of the ladies who worked in that area, she said, "Clarence, I worked on there for 15 years. There's no walls like the one you described."
Yeah.
And this fire marshal wouldn't have recognized me because we were working together. I didn't have any dust on me. When he saw me, I was covered with dust. Couldn't have been a bright light shining through any doors because it was still dark. It was like midnight because of the dust.
Yep.
The EMS guys had to shine their flashlight up at the street corner sign to see where we were. There's no doubt in my mind that was an angel of the Lord, because the first word out of his mouth was, "I see you, you made it." Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's amazing. I went back down there searching for these walls, doesn't exist. And also Vietnam, or some veterans, all they were walking around, they were saying just their serial number, rank, name, serial number, which is the information you would give if you were captured in a war.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about the silence after the tower came down.
Well, after I left the hospital, as a matter of fact, I went home after going by after leaving St. Vincent's Hospital. The doctor said that he couldn't.
Just so the folks know, St. Vincent's was where most of the people that were still alive
Right.
were moved to initially before
Right.
they were transferred elsewhere in the city.
Right. As a matter of fact, Doc, they were supposed to go to St. Vincent, but most of them died at the scene.
Yeah.
And the doctor told me, he said, "Clarence, we'll perform surgery. We normally give anesthesia before we reset limbs, but in your case, so we don't have the time. A lot of people are going to be coming in." So he said, "I could snap your arm back into place and you can go see a doctor later." So I said, I didn't verbalize, but I said to myself, "What are you thinking about? I'm a Marine fire lieutenant, snap it back into my place. Ouch, I don't think I'll do that again." But after that, things just got surreal. It was like I was in another world. It was like, this can't be happening in the US. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And nothing was really, I wasn't grasping anything until probably the next day. I do have recall problems from the trauma I experienced, brain trauma, but it was probably the next day or the day after, then things started to come together. This did happen in America, Clarence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think from a number of your Fidney brothers that survived when the towers came down, they said what struck them so much was the silence after the towers collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the amount of dust, the dust you talked about. People, I don't think people can begin to understand what you're talking about when you talk about dust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But one of the guys shared with me that it was dead silence. And then all of a sudden you started to see heads pop up out of the dust, guys that had survived.
Mm-hmm.
And basically everybody just started heading for the river.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody knew what else to do at that point, but it's pretty interesting. Now, do you, you mentioned PTSD.
Yes.
Post-traumatic stress.
Mhm.
I don't like to say disorder. I just like to say post-traumatic stress. Where did you see that start to emerge in yourself?
Well, Doc, I didn't realize until after September 11 that I was suffering from post-traumatic stress from the time I was in Vietnam.
Gotcha.
It only came to the surface after the collapse at the World Trade Center, and the police department ordered all of their guys in for treatment, to see therapists or whatever. And that made it a little easier for me to go talk to a therapist. And that's when at the VA hospital, of course, and that's when I realized I was suffering all these years from post-traumatic stress. And as a matter of fact, the World Trade Center compounded it.
Yeah.
And back the stress from Vietnam. So one night after the collapse at the World Trade Center in Vietnam, you don't step on anything on the trail, whatever, trash, bags, cans, you step over because there could be booby trap.
Okay.
And after September 11 and being at the collapse at the World Trade Center, a friend and I went to the hospital to visit someone, and she had to parallel park, and there was a plastic trash bag in the spot. And I said, I'll move it. When I got there, it was like, oh no, this thing could explode. So I had to take my foot and kind of kick it out of the way. But one trauma brings another back, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And for the benefit of those who are in the profession, fire, police, law enforcement, EMS, when do you start to seek help?
You know, Doc, at one point in my life, probably until after the World Trade Center, I thought it was weak to go for help. But I found out since that healthy people go for help when they realize something is wrong, and they go in for professional help. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. A lot of us suffer in silence, like I did for years.
Yep.
And then I decided to go for therapy, and I still have issues. It's really difficult for me to get up in the morning sometimes, but I do. Right after September 11, man, Jesus Christ, I stayed in bed all day. I went to physical therapy, I think twice a week, go back home, get into bed. I could eat, but I couldn't prepare it. And the blinds would be closed all day. And I walked, this is in Brooklyn, New York. I walked to the corner store a few times, but I had to get back home. And then after living there about 5 years, the noise and stuff is just too much for me. So I relocated to Virginia.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite an ordeal to go through that. And even now, I don't lie in bed too long in the morning because I don't want to go back into that, not being able to get out, not being able to eat. And so, and I was telling my wife a few minutes ago, I said, yes, I was thinking about those days back then. It was like I would go all day sometimes. I was like, hey, I forgot to eat today. And that's not me. I'm a pretty good sized boy and I like to eat, So, and I was forgetting to eat. It was horrible. And I'm telling you, locked in the house like that, I was active after the fire department, leaving the fire department. I had a part-time job for 15 years. I was always on the go.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now I'm shut down. It's really difficult.
Do you think that writing the book helped you?
It helped me in the sense that I've heard people say, you share your experiences and that cuts it in half. I don't think that has happened to me, but I do believe what has happened. Well, not believe. What happens is a lot of people have read my book, and I became a motivational speaker, and a lot of people have heard my story, and they benefited from it. So I know I'm right where I'm supposed to be, regardless of how I'm feeling. Like in the neighborhood here in Virginia, I used to frequent a store every day, and after a while, this young lady said, she would smile at me. And I'd go back the next day and she would smile at me. And she was a young lady. So I said to myself, oh, old man, you still have it. So finally I went in and she said, if I wrote you a note, would you read this? I said, yeah. So I went in, I think the next day and she gave me a little letter, and it read that she had problems riding in cars. She has jumped out of moving cars, but after she read my book and heard my story, she was actually able to get in a car and go to the beach with her parents. And
Great.
Yeah, and I spoke at 2 schools in Arizona.
Yeah.
Same thing, and I openly shared about how I feel and my depression, and a number of kids told the teacher, man, I get depressed also, but after I shared it. So that's the benefit I get, Doc, from writing a book and, putting it out there to help other people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think, I think if in the position you've been in, and I've done a lot of public speaking at conferences and so on, and if we demonstrate to people that we're not bulletproof,
Mhm.
maybe some of them will face up to the fact that they are not bulletproof either.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if we can get these kids in our professions, firefighting, EMS, law enforcement, to deal with their situation,
Right.
or at least open up to somebody that they've got some issues,
Mhm.
it's helpful. There are several people, for example, and I mentioned to you earlier that I do critical incident stress management. There's several people that have got my phone number, and they know that that phone for them is never off.
Mhm.
And one of them has called me more than once when he's been dealing with something.
Yeah.
That makes me feel good.
Oh, yeah.
Because I already know I'm not bulletproof. We talked about it earlier, but
Right. Right.
I didn't believe it. I don't think I believed it until ground zero, but I think up until ground zero, I thought I could pretty much deal with anything.
Yep. Yeah.
Then not so much after that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, one of the things that I think we want to close on is, A, I want people to read your book, number one. B, one of the missions that we have with the museum is telling people where we've come from, number one, but also focusing on the concept of resiliency, recovery, etc. And I think if we can expand conversations like you and I are having tonight, we maybe will convince a few other people that maybe they do need to go talk to somebody about stuff, because maybe there's some skeletons in their closet they don't even know are there.
Exactly.
So my friend, I thank you for your time tonight. It's been great chatting with you before this and during.
Yes.
And I'm glad to have gotten to know you a lot better. And my boss is coming back on. There she is.
Hi, boss.
Yeah, I only think I'm president of the museum. The lady down there is the one that actually runs the joint. But anyway.
Hey, Doc, may I squeeze in just one more last?
Absolutely.
Some time ago, and I had to put this together to kind of figure out what was going on. When in Virginia, I'd get in the yard in my SUV, and my thoughts are neutral, but when I put my seatbelt on, I felt powerful. My mind went to driving a fire truck again, back to Vietnam. So I said, what is triggering this? It was my seatbelt coming across my shoulder. I used to just sling my mask over my shoulder in the fire department. If I needed it, it's there. If I, get in too deep in the smoke, I always reach back, pick the other strap. And in Vietnam, the back straps, So it's just amazing how these little things that's triggers, yeah. They're going on and we aren't unaware of it. And that's why it's important to get in contact with some professionals and kind of figure out what's going on with us.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. Yep. Cool. Christy, what would you like to add, my dear?
Clarence went into a story I didn't think he was going to go into. You guys were both very respectful of the museum time, but Clarence is also very much involved, and Doc, you are as well, in another organization. And I wonder if you want to, if I give you 30 seconds, do you want to squeeze your plug in for the Freedom Flag Foundation before we tune off for the night?
You betcha. Clarence and I are both on the board of the National Freedom Flag Foundation. It was started, I think, by John Riley. And the purpose of it is to see a flag on every firehouse and a firehouse in every state and a school in every state where the freedom flag is flying. Kids do not forget 9/11 ever. And Clarence, if you want to add something that I may have missed with that, fire away.
No, you were fine in what you said, but you also brought back memories. This is why I'm on the board of directors of the Freedom Flag and trying to get this into every state and to every home, wherever possible. I had a friend that just passed away. He was in New York City. I feel sad when I'm talking about it. Joe, he just passed away from World Trade Center dust complication and carcinogenic stuff was in the dust. And great guy. I mean, actually great guy. I'm going to squeeze in quickly that I would be upstairs in the office doing my paperwork and they'd call me down for chow. And there would be this little fork next to my plate. And I would sling it in the sink and I said, next time we go out, I'm going to buy some man-sized fork. This went on for a long time. And one night I threw the fork in the sink and I looked up and I caught Joe smiling. I said, you sucker, you've been giving me the business. But yeah, we have fun.
Part of what I think that we're doing with what John is doing with the Freedom Flag Foundation is interesting too, in terms of trying to get kids to remember 9/11, number one. Mm-hmm. The other thing that disturbs me, and I'm sure disturbs you as well, Clarence, is 343 brothers died on 9/11. I haven't kept count, but I have a feeling we have probably exceeded that 343 number that have died since then, as a result of the diseases that we picked up at Ground Zero. That's disturbing. And I think that's something we need to let the general public know about. Law enforcement, EMS, and fire personnel that have died since 9/11 as a result of the response to 9/11. So there you are, Christy. That's my word for the evening. On the Freedom Flag Foundation, I'm sure John Wiley will give me a raise now. From 10% of nothing is still nothing. So
raises for all. I approve. I also just want to say both thank you to both Doc and Clarence for joining us this evening. Thank you both for all the volunteer work you do. April is Volunteer Appreciation Month. One of those things us bosses have to keep track of. So I want to do a big shout out to all of our volunteers here at the museum, both the ones that are helping with some grunt work projects, our volunteer leaders for the organization. It's a completely volunteer-led organization, and they just kind of point me in the right direction or keep me reined in, however we want to look at that. And I want to say thank you most of all to the first responding volunteers that are out there working day in and day out. I know you don't always come to the forefront of everybody's mind when they say thank you, but you are the reason we are here today. So thank you to every first responder, but definitely to those that are volunteering their time to keep us all safe and healthy, especially over 2020 and 2021. It's been an exciting few months, to say the least.
Good closing idea. Good closing thoughts, Christy. Thank you.
Excellent. So we are back in 2 weeks. Bring your birthday cake because it'll be my birthday. Not that I'm expecting presents, but cake is a must. So we'll see you April 23rd back here. We have Tom Scott joining us, and he'll have some more wonderful stories. And in the meantime, stay tuned to social media and check our website regularly. We have some big projects coming to fruition. I'm very excited to hit the go button when it's time. Until then, stay safe, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch up with you in a couple of weeks.
Great. Good night, everybody.